Hello there, I'm here today to wrap up my October reading. As has been the case in the past few months, I've only read 4 books this month, so it hasn't been the best, and to be honest, I've not been that well this month, and I find if I'm ill, I just don't enjoy books when I read them, which is kind of not fair on the book, but alas. So it's not been the best in terms of enjoyment, but let's get straight into it. So first I read The Lie Tree by Frances Harding. This was the winner of the Costa Book Award. I think, if I recall rightly, it's the only kids book that's won. I might be wrong, but it was quite a big deal. It got quite a lot of attention when it came out, and I really liked the concept of this. So this is about basically a tree that feeds on lies. So you have to tell lies to make it thrive, and then it will give you these fruits that show you a truth, basically. And this little girl, her dad is like this big man in, I think, the archaeology or scientific field, and he has basically been disgraced because it comes out that a lot of his big discoveries were lies, and he dies at the start of the novel. Not a spoiler, it does happen very early on, and she discovers that it's because he has been feeding this lie tree, and she kind of gets into wanting to know what happened to her father because she doesn't believe the stories that it was an accident, and also finding out, you know, all about the lie tree. So I really liked that premise. I thought the idea was clever, but I have to say I didn't enjoy this, and it very much reminded me of the kind of, there's a certain subgenre of kids books that are like the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events books, where kids are kind of taken to this isolated place and they live in like big mansion houses, and they live a very different kind of unrealistic life, I suppose. Obviously, you know, there's no such thing as a lie tree. This was gonna always be a kind of magical book, but I didn't like the life that she was living. I found it a bit boring. Ultimately, I think the ending for me especially became really unrealistic, where all the adults became the bad guys, and yeah, it just didn't work for me. It just didn't overall work for me. I didn't love. Then another book I didn't love was Margaret Atwood's The Testaments. Now, I find it really difficult to put my thoughts about this book into a cohesive thing, and I think the problem is that it's really difficult to judge this book without considering the series of The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know. I think I wouldn't say that I blame Margaret Atwood for bringing this book out, and I don't think it was kind of jumping on the bandwagon of the hype that The Handmaid's Tale has been getting. I think it was purely a case of, I think she wanted to take back the story and tell it her way, and make sure that it went in the direction that she had intended it to go. And she does not include things that happen in the series, and there are certainly things in here that don't fit with the theory of the series, but she does use things that have been placed in the series, and this very much feels like it's in the world that has been built by the recent series, which is actually incredibly different to the world that you have in the actual Handmaid's Tale, and I just felt ultimately like this didn't work for me because I didn't feel like it added anything, and I think that is the ultimate thing for me. I think Margaret Atwood is one of these women who, she writes books that have real meaning behind them, especially like her dystopians and her kind of political observations. They're very purposeful and they have real meaning behind them, and this book didn't have that, nor did it really focus on Gilead itself and the politics and dynamics within that society, and I get that that was what The Handmaid's Tale was about, but we didn't really get any of the world in this book. Anyway, I'm sure most of you know what this is about, but I'll just go through it in case I'm babbling on without mentioning it. So this is told from 3 perspectives. One of them is a girl living in Canada and observing Gilead from the outside. Another is a girl who lives in a command. She's one of the commander's daughters, who has been birthed to the family, and she's looking at Gilead from quite a privileged perspective, but she's still expected to go into an arranged marriage. And then we also get Aunt Lydia, who aunt that rules the handmaids in The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, the main feeling I had from this was that it didn't add anything to the story. It wasn't necessary. I don't feel like it was a book that I needed to have read. I also don't feel like it was anywhere near Margaret Atwood's normal standard, and I'm kind of disgruntled, I think, that it was a joint winner for the Booker Prize, because it's not a Booker book. It's just not. And yeah, so that annoyed me. Although Margaret Atwood, I believe, did say something along the lines of, this book has had enough hype, I don't think it deserves the prize itself. So that redeems her. And you know, I still love Margaret Atwood. She's one of my favourite authors and has been for a long time, but this book is not a winner, and I just don't think it's necessary ultimately. I just don't. Then I read a better experience, which was The Gloaming by Kirsty Logan. Now, can we have a moment for this cover? It is just stunning, absolutely stunning. This is Kirsty Logan's second book, and I believe it is supposed to be linked to the Gracekeepers in some form or other. I think it's meant to be set in roughly the same world, but to be honest, I didn't really get that, other than the fact that the sea plays a very big part in it, just like it does in the Gracekeepers. That was about where the crossover ended for me, really. But that said, I really enjoyed this. So this is set on a really remote island where this family are living, and on this island, when people come to the time where they're getting old and they're getting to the point where they're going to die, they go up to this high mountain on the top of the island and they turn into stone. And basically the novel follows this family in the aftermath of a death that is untimely in their family timeline, I suppose, and doesn't involve the stone tradition. And it looks at the years, really, in the aftermath of that situation and the effect that it has on them, and also the effect that the island and the life that they live on it have on them. It's a slow book, and I have to say it didn't overly have me picking it up and turning the pages, but that was okay, because I think what I love about Kirsty Logan is that she has this really gentle way of writing, and yet she writes about really quite disconcerting things. Like, the island is quite a dark character in this book, I suppose. It's quite a sinister place, and yet Kirsty Logan describes it with such striking language. Yeah, it was enjoyable. I think I probably overall preferred the Gracekeepers, because I think it was a bit more, I don't know, it had a bit more going for it for me, but I really enjoyed this as just a gentle character study more than anything. And then finally I finished the month on Barbara Kingsolver's The Lacuna. I ended up reading most of this during Dewey's 24-hour readathon. I think I read about 300 pages because I intended to get it done before that, and it just didn't happen, so I took the chance to finish it. This was my second Barbara Kingsolver, and I was not disappointed. I absolutely love the Poisonwood Bible, but I kind of avoided picking anything else up from her because I've not heard anything good about her other books, actually. A lot of people who love the Poisonwood Bible either don't get on with her other books or just don't see them worth reading. Yeah, generally I think I always had it in my head that she was a bit of a one-hit wonder with the Poisonwood Bible, but actually this was just as beautifully written. I would say obviously that the Poisonwood Bible is still up there, but it was always going to be. So basically this follows a young writer. He starts his life in Mexico and he ends up becoming a plasterer's apprentice for Diego Rivera, who was Frida Kahlo's husband, and eventually that role leads him to become part of their household staff. He becomes their cook and eventually their receptionist, and he basically spends the first half of the novel writing about their lives, writing about what he sees in their household, writing about his relationship with Frida Kahlo, which I didn't actually know that this book was about Frida Kahlo, so that was really interesting, and looking predominantly at the period of time when Trotsky came to stay with them when he was in hiding. And I found that part really interesting. I'm always a bit sceptical of fictional retellings of real life historical figures because I think they can be done really poorly, but actually because this had the conduit of this writer it's basically in the format of him writing his diaries, it kind of worked for me, and I never felt like we were on the surface of those characters and just looking at key events in their lives rather than really delving into them. And I think Barbara Kingsolver perhaps purposefully didn't really build up their characterization and look really closely at them. It was more about the writer, because I think as soon as you kind of try to fictionalize a historic figure, it has the potential to go wrong. I don't know, that's just something I feel. And then the second half of the book is after Trotsky is shot, everything gets a bit messy in the Diego household. Frida has developed a fondness for this staff boy, so she basically helps him to get to America and helps him to save all his writing that has been taken because it's considered to be communist propaganda and things, and we look at how he becomes a famous author in America, and then what happens when the police start looking at him again and relating him with these communist goings on. Again, with the Poisonwood Bible, I felt like the first half was very much stronger than the second half, and I did feel like that again with this book. I think Barbara Kingsolver's only mistake, like, she's a stunning writer, her only mistake perhaps is that she writes very thick books, and I don't necessarily think they need to be that thick. I think this would have been stronger with maybe 100 or 200 pages less, and the same for the Poisonwood Bible, but I did enjoy it. As I say, the first half was really captivating, and the second half was interesting as well. I think she does really interesting things with looking at politics and the way that people I suppose twist things to suit their own agendas. Yeah, she's a really interesting writer and I really enjoy her. So that's everything I read this month. As I say, it wasn't the best, but it definitely picked up at the second half of the month and I'm happy with what I got through. Please let me know down below what you've been reading and I will see you next time. Bye!